Hello, my name is John Rosebush. This presentation is about the sustainability of the human race. I am the founder, the CEO, and the president of the Worldwide Development Corporation. I founded the Worldwide Development Corporation after 13 years of intensive research on generating kinetic energy from river flow. We believe we have created a new energy invention that will power this planet. We have put together a prototype, and it's not just some desk-type prototype that is some theory, but it's an actual replica of the new energy invention once implemented around the world. So it's very, very close to the end result. The next thing we have created is all the engineering for it, and within the engineering, it's got the power projections for it, etc., and we have 3D drawings also that we have created. There's 13 of them. One of the 3D drawings is a simulation mode similar to a movie that you see on Disney Channel or something that actually shows the energy invention in operation. As far as the power projections on the engineering, they all have very sound disciplined engineering disciplines behind every single calculation. So they're very well trusted. So the next thing that we've done is I've wanted to introduce the new energy invention to the world. And I've been to the Department of Energy, and I've talked with those folks. I've also been to the United Nations about 9 months ago and talked with them, but I did not trust them. And so what I've done is I've turned to social media to attempt to bring in the right partners to move forward with this project. I've never asked anybody for a penny the entire 13 years, and I'm not asking for anybody for money today. I think that builds a great deal of credibility. And so, by the way, this new energy invention has the ability to generate almost unlimited energy throughout the entire planet. It doesn't consume resources. It's very powerful, which makes it sustainable. Humanity theoretically should be able to last for millions of years with this new energy invention. So let's get on with the presentation if we could. The first slide just talks about shows the human race and the evolution of the human race. The next slide actually talks about the size of the population around the planet. We're now at 7.6 billion people. Many scientists believe that we cannot maintain that many people on the planet. I believe they're wrong. And hopefully, as we go through this presentation, you'll get a good understanding of why. You know, if you can't see something, is it real? Well, I'm hoping at the end of this presentation that you'll agree with what I've, of the presentation, and you'll agree that we are in peril as a world. So let's continue on to the next slide. If you notice, in 1950, the world population was 1.5 billion people. 1.5 billion people. Today, there is 7.6, 7.8, somewhere in that area. Now, a lot of that population growth was due to a modern society, which is made up of oil, that allows products to be made like plastics, and the other portion to it was because of modern medicine has increased lifelong, the life of people around the world. So, we believe that, well, let me go on to the next slide. You know, because we have such a large population around the world, you can see this slide represents the overshoot. In other words, how many resources we're using versus the population on the planet. As you can see, we're using the equivalent of 1.7 planets it would take to be sustainable for the human race. Now that is, and by the way, by the year 2030, they're predicting that we'll end up using, we'll need 2 planets if we want to continue living the way we are and be able to support that many people. So you can tell this is an extreme problem that we're facing in the world for the sustainability of the human race. And by the way, I'll get into a little bit further about the new energy invention as the presentation goes on. The next one is oil. Many people think we have almost unlimited oil around the world, but actually we don't. BP predicts we only have approximately 50 years of oil remaining. Now, these are proven reserves. And by the way, all this materials I'm going to give you are out on the internet, and they attempt to be as factual as possible for the audience. So if you take a look, 50 years of oil remaining. Now, we're going to have better recovery methods, because today we can only recover about 50% of the oil in the ground. Now, you know, we know about fracking. That's supposed to increase the amount of oil that we can produce from a reservoir. But the problem with fracking is that it has a great hazard potential to mix the oil with our aquifers. And we see that in natural gas. We see that around the world in many examples. So it's a very dangerous thing, but it is a better recovery method. And they've gotten desperate to do that. And that's why fracking evolved the way it has. So, and by the way, oil is the most important commodity in the world, besides water. And I'll explain to you why. That's how we make our plastics, our asphalt, our shingles. Actually, in the United States, over 7,000 products are made from oil. 30% of the oil consumed in the United States is to make products. A lot of people wouldn't hardly believe that, but we've had an overabundance of oil throughout the last 100 years, and we've learned how to use that to make products. I mean, many of you, can you imagine a world without plastics? I know it's not very good with food, but look around. Look around everywhere. There's plastics everywhere. And tires and asphalt. We couldn't have a modern society without it. And without a modern society, we could never support 7.6 billion people and projected to be 10 billion people by the year 2030 or 2050. So you can imagine the importance of preserving our oil. And that's one of the big things this new energy invention does, is it has the capability to completely get us off oil, completely. We believe the new energy invention, as I'll talk about later in the presentation, will power everything in our world. And it doesn't consume resources. And by the way, even if we use something else, attempt to use something else like corn or something like that, we would just, with 7.6 billion people projected to be 10 billion people, we would just consume those resources over time. And also, by the way, that would conflict with feeding 10 billion people around the world. Okay? Next slide. Life without oil. Again, it goes into the conversation that I talked about. What would we do without oil? And by the way, the projections today with the amount of reserves around the world, they could change some. There is such a thing as unproven reserves. But remember, we're mining oil up in Canada with loaders. That's how desperate we've gotten. And by the way, in the United States, for the people that live here in the United States, the Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota oil shale find is 9 billion barrels. And you go, wow, that's a lot of oil. And they've kind of gave a lot of hoopla about it. You know, today the world consumes 34 billion barrels a year. That's less than a 4-month world oil supply. Yet the United States has got all hoopla about we're self-independent. We still import about 45, 48% of the oil we consume from the Middle East. And the Middle East is going to run out of oil, just like many other places around the world have. The North Sea in Europe has. So when it dries up, they've been supporting the world for the last 40 years, 50 years. There isn't an unlimited supply. Many people, you know, the oil is in between the cracks in the rocks that have been there for millions of years. There is a limit to it, and we're going to reach that limit. Now, you know, BP talked about 50 years of oil remaining. Let's say we find some more oil. So we have 80 or 100 years remaining before we run out of oil. And so then that says, well, you know, for our grandkids, maybe they've got a life, maybe not, but then the next generation, there's no world to be had, because without a modern society and without oil to make plastics, etc., we will destroy ourselves, because you cannot support 10 billion people without oil. What would we make everything out of? Tin? Wood? Glass? That's impossible. So that's the criticalness of oil, and I want to make sure that's important here to be said. And what's so important about this new energy invention is not only can it replace all the electricity around the planet, but we believe that we can replace all the oil around the planet. We think we can generate an equivalent alternative energy at an equivalent to a gallon of oil for 25 to 30 cents without any fluctuations, because remember, it's just electricity then. And by the way, we would power our vehicles with hydrogen, electricity, even compressed air. So, and by the way, we could also convert our vehicles to run off from hydrogen, very similar to a natural gas conversion. So we could use our existing cars, etc., and we could convert them to run off hydrogen. We also can, today there's technology that the hydrogen pumps look very similar to a gasoline pump. And it has the ability to generate the hydrogen right at the time of fueling those vehicles. So it's a very safe delivery system. And now, again, you would have to make sure that the hydrogen tank on the vehicle was safe, but you know, even gasoline is explosive. We can handle that. And we can make the conversion very quickly to get off oil for land transportation. Now, for airline transportation, the technology isn't there yet, so it's going to take some time. So we're going to use oil. Also, for sea transportation, you know, unclear. I don't have the solution for everything, but I do have a solution for most things that mankind faces that are major. Okay, next slide. This slide, it represents plastics. The reason why I put this slide in there is I wanted to show the increased consumption of plastics around the world. And really, it shows the amount of feedstocks that are used to make plastics. And this kind of shows you that how important plastics is. Now, later on, we'll talk about plastics in the ocean and the recycle commitments that we need to make around the world to also create a sustainable planet. So let's go on to the next slide. This slide kind of represents what I'm talking about. Right now, we have a linear economy. And what I mean by that is we produce something, actually we go out and get resources, then we produce something, then we use it, then we throw it away. Okay? And there's two parts to a recyclable world that's sustainable. The first part is an energy source that doesn't consume resources, regardless if they're fossil fuels or if they're growing corn or using seaweed, etc., to generate energy, which it would be impossible to do. The next piece is to recycle. Because remember me stating that 30% of the oil consumed in the United States is to make products? Well, that's a lot of the oil that's produced, isn't it? We want to preserve that oil so it lasts for millions of years. Now, how do we do that? We change over to an energy source that doesn't consume resources. The second major piece is recycling. We need to recycle plastics to make plastics. Especially oil products, we need to recycle to make so we can make more products out of that raw material. It's critical. Those are the two things that are necessary to have a sustainable planet. Without those two things, it's impossible. Okay? So let's go on to the next slide. Right now, the world has major water shortages. We see it all the time. Only 1% of the water is fresh water around the world. Now imagine, 60% of the people that live in this world live around oceans. Look how much water they have. But you know what? They can't use it. Why don't we desalinate today? I can tell you why, because it takes a great deal of energy to desalinate. Saudi Arabia is one of the few countries around the world that desalinates a great deal of their water because they have oil, okay? Even though they're going to run out of oil here one of these days too. So by this new energy invention, because I told you could create almost unlimited energy around the world. And later on, we'll show you a challenge that I posted to the United Nations while I was there. I actually sent that letter to the Secretary General of the United Nations, and they invited me to the United Nations. That's how I got there. But the problem was there was so much bureaucracy, and all I saw was people jockeying for power, not concerned about what the sustainability of the human race, even though that's what I went there for, and that's what the conference was for. And so it was very difficult to get through to them. I also spoke to an individual that worked for the United Nations, of course, and he said their charter doesn't allow them to partner with someone like me, because I was going there to look for a partner that represents the entire world, that also could protect the patents, which I'll talk about later on. So now we have water shortages, and by the way, they're cropping up all over the world. If you take a look at India and China, India has about 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 major cities, 20 million people, that are predicted to run out of tap water in the next few years. Now, you know, people say, well, gosh, well, India is mismanaging something. No, the same with China. They're crisscrossing huge channels across their entire country to try to get fresh water to people. No, neither country, both countries are very intelligent, both countries are ancient, both countries are full of smart people. The problem with India and China, and the reason why the problems are showing up there first, is because of their land mass is small and their population is huge. So they don't have very many resources for the number of people living in their countries, which is a huge problem. That's why they're going to face these challenges way ahead of the rest of the world. But the rest of the world will catch up, and they'll have challenges. Now, I know California had some water shortages in Brazil, and even England is predicted to run out of water in the next 10 years, possibly, or have major water shortages. But right now, it's India and China that are facing that, again, because of the size of their population. With unlimited energy that I talk about with this new energy invention, we could desalinate water and make the entire world be a water oasis where nobody needed to run out of energy. And we'll get to the price of the energy from this new energy invention later on again in the speech. But, you know, I'm trying to point out many things that this new energy invention can do. It actually will serve as a basis for a sustainable planet for humanity going forward. Okay, next. You notice the ocean reefs are bleaching. 50% of the Great Barrier Reef is bleached out, and almost all the other shallow reefs are bleaching out at an enormous rate. Now, that's because of all the CO2 going in the oceans. And by the way, 25 to 30% of marine life live in the reefs around the world. So it may seem like, well, you know, the reefs are going away, but now the small marine life goes away, and by the way, the larger marine life depends on the smaller marine life for their food. We're destroying our oceans at an accelerated rate. Everything I state in this presentation is real, and these slides came from the internet, and I know things can be biased, but do a little research on your own, and you'll find out that what's being presented here is pretty accurate. Now, you know, I hope that we trust science around the world, because these come from experts around the world. And by the way, even in my website and some of the stuff on the website go in much more detail than this presentation. I'm just highlighting some of the things that are wrong with the world. So let's hit the next one. Okay, I know a lot of people around the world have seen the Pacific Ocean garbage patch in the Pacific Ocean, the garbage patch. You know, it's now the size of France, Greece, and Spain combined. So it's become nothing more than a place to get rid of our trash. And there's a link at the bottom of that screen for the people that will view this later on in a video. I think there's links to quite a few of these screens and stuff. So if you look at the bottom, you can go take a look at the actual articles or whatever that these things come from. That's also destroying our oceans. Now, that's got nothing to do with this energy invention, but I think I wanted to point it out because of what we're doing and to our planet. This is our home. This is our home. It's the only home we have. You wouldn't treat your home like this. We surely shouldn't treat the planet like this. Okay, next screen. Okay, this screen, I gotta make sure I can read it here. I'm gonna step forward just to read the screen here. Okay, this screen talks about resource management as the key to sustainability. You know, that includes everything that we've been talking about here. That includes the new energy invention with consuming resources. That includes recycling. Those are the two big things, but there's many other things we can do around the world. First thing, we can clean up our oceans. That's for sure. The next thing we could do is build vertical farms for farming. Again, it needs energy. We're going to have unlimited energy. So the two things that are critical we need to keep in mind are energy without consuming resources that is ample for everybody. The next thing is recycling, which turns us into a circular economy. And when I say recycle, I mean nothing goes to the dump, except for, you know, the food garbage or something like that. But anything that can be recycled needs to be recycled. You know, the unlimited energy source came from me, and that is a missing piece to the sustainability of the human race. Okay? Recycling is up to the world, and that was one of the reasons I went to the United Nations, was to talk to them, because they need to participate. if we're going to have a sustainable planet. Otherwise, everything is a moot point. I mean, if we only got 2 or 3 generations left, and we truly could have just that few, then what the heck, right? Then nothing else really matters. So I hope you're really paying attention to this, because I am not asking for money from anybody. This is about education. What I'm looking to do is gather the right partners. And I'll explain to you again at the end of the slides what I'm after and why I'm attempting to introduce and implement this technology around the world in a responsible way that creates a healthy planet that's sustainable. Next screen. Okay, here I just want to talk about cutting down our rainforest. And again, it does have stuff to do with energy, because what we're doing with the rainforest in a lot of cases is creating biomass. And I'll talk about it in the next screen. But also, it's a carbon filter to our world. That's how those trees consume a lot of carbon. And instead of going to the rainforest, it's going to the oceans. And it's affecting climate change all over the world. Okay, next screen. Okay, I've got to go forward again just to look. Oh, climate change. This screen is about climate change. And, everybody says climate change is a problem. Climate change really isn't a problem at all. It's the effects of what we're doing. That's why it's hard to pinpoint, gosh, is this real or not real? Because there are different effects of what we're doing around the world. The real issue around the world is resource management. Running out of oil would make climate change seem like nothing, absolutely nothing. Imagine running out of oil. It's 98% of our transportation fuels. It makes our products that make a modern society possible. It's really the key to sustainability, not climate change. Climate change happens to be an effect. And that's why everybody, they see the effects and so they think that's the problem. It's really not. It's just all the major effects that are happening, which climate change is real. But again, it's not the core problem of creating a sustainable planet. You can't solve climate change. They're just effects. You have to solve what's caused the effects around the world. Okay? Next screen. This is an example of a wind chart, of an actual wind chart in Germany for a year. Look at the variations in that chart. Electricity needs to be at a steady flow. And look what we have here in Germany. This is an actual chart of a few years ago, Germany's electricity. Wind, from their wind turbines. We'll never be able to power our planet by the weather. And any foolishness from all these engineers and scientists that think we can are crazy. Wind is only available about 40% of the time, and you can see the fluctuations within the wind. Now, we need 24/7 electricity. Otherwise, we couldn't have refrigeration, and a modern society couldn't exist. So the idea that we're installing wind, and solar is the next chart. Same thing. Solar is even worse. Solar actually is about 6 hours a day. And then on a cloudy day, how in the world do you use a steady flow of electricity? Because you can't. And then, have you ever seen anybody off the utility system using this? They brag about their energy neutral only because they can produce enough energy, which who knows when they're producing it, right, that they supply. The problem with that is it's all the wrong times. That's why you see batteries come in, right? And so are we going to run our world off batteries? Impossible. Matter of fact, a lot of people think that between wind and solar, it almost makes no contribution to our energy system around the world. It's just to make money. Now, let's go through a wind turbine to be exact. First thing they do is they market a wind turbine by capacity. So a 2 megawatt wind turbine, wind only blows 40% of the time. And by the way, there's gust and lows, which makes the energy generated off it almost unusable in a lot of cases anyway. That's why they've, again, introduced batteries. Our cogeneration that you've heard a lot about. Problem with cogeneration is you still can only use, you can't use above that. So they've tried to widen the grids so they can try to load balance that electricity grid. But it's almost impossible. And by the way, in Germany's utility rates are the highest in the world. And by the way, Germany is building a very large coal plant right now, and the headlines were so they can keep the lights on. Now, I think it's very good that they've attempted to power our world by wind and solar. But the problem is it's impossible, and they know it, and they don't market it like that. It'd be like me trying to market a mileage on a vehicle by going down a mountain in Idaho. That's how deceptive the way they market these products. Now, you know, their big excuse is, well, we're generating energy. Well, if you're generating energy when you can't use the energy, or when you've got to try to store it, and by the way, to store it in batteries and then use it after that is very, very wasteful. So, you know, when they talk about the cost of wind and solar, they don't talk about all the other things that are associated with it that are very horrible, and that it will never replace 24/7 energy. 24/7 firm energy comes from natural gas, from coal, from dams. Those are the things that generate 24/7 energy. My new energy invention, based on river flow, similar to a dam in the sense that it generates 24/7 energy. Okay, well, I'll show you the solar chart. That's a actual solar chart for a cloudy day. Now imagine trying to use that electricity. And by the way, the household gets to use that electricity, but the utility company suffers. And why do I say that? Because the utility can't use those peaks there. And the bottom part of it is very low. It's very little electricity because the utility company is responsible for everybody to keep their lights on. So what's going to happen when we get 30% of solar and wind use around the world? I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen. The utility company is going to go broke. And then if they close up, we no longer get 24/7 energy. Either that or it's going to be like Germany, where it's going to be so expensive. And by the way, Germany's paying coal companies to be on standby. So when the wind don't blow at all, because remember, the wind may not blow for a week. The sun, it may be cloudy for a week. In the winter, it happens a lot. You know, if you're an average household and you want to get off the grid and you're using wind and solar, and you're getting ready to cook dinner that night, and you look and the electricity's been out for a day. All the food in the freezer and the refrigerator thaw and are no good. So what do you tell your kids? Well, I'm sorry, kids. I was going to make a great dinner, but all the food is spoiled. Now think about that on a city-wide, on a country. Think about the wars that would break out over energy. That's how serious this is. You know, for a household, they can get over that, right? Because they're hooked up to utility. But imagine a country or a state or not having 24/7 energy. Supermarkets, all the food, you know, spoiling. I mean, the scientists know all this, but yet a lot of them work for private business that are only interested in making money off those wind turbines and solar panels. All right, next slide. Biomass, I talked about it earlier. I thought biomass was generating energy from like poop or something, you know, and I thought, well, that's pretty cool that they've come up with it. I find out it's wood chips. And it's the most inefficient energy source on the planet when it comes to consuming resources. They actually, if you look at the page, it's a huge amount of energy even to produce the wood chips. And by the way, that is helping a lot with deforesting. If you look at Canada, they're really big into it, again, because people can make money. All the biomass is wood chips in replacement of coal. And by the way, if you cut down every tree in the United States, you would only be able to power the United States for 1 year. That's how inefficient it is. And yet, again, countries are trying to use biomass. It's desperation over energy. And if you look at China and India, they are very desperate. India has rolling blackouts all the time and scheduled electricity. Could you imagine living in a country where they say from 5 o'clock at night till 11 o'clock at night you got electricity, but then other times you don't because we need it for other parts of the country. All right, next slide. Next slide, I got to look again. I'm sorry, but I need to look at this. The ITER project, it's a fusion project that's going on over in France. And there's about, if you look at the slide, there's about, maybe 10 countries involved, and it's a huge expense, $1.16 billion or something. And we should be doing that research, but we shouldn't be thinking about counting on that research to power our planet. You know, that's for future. That may be for space exploration someday in the future, etc. But there's no way we're going to power our planet. Right now, they're predicting in the year 2032, they're going to be able to generate, I think it's 2 or 4 gigawatts of electricity, additional electricity of the energy they put into it. Today, they can't produce more than they put into it, so it isn't working yet. But with lasers and with different things, they're attempting to make that work. I think it's very admirable. I think they need to continue on with the research, but 10,000 scientists over there are with all the hoopla, they're trying to convince the world that we're generating the power of the sun and everything else. The problem with that, remember my timeline and the expense of it, 2 to 4 gigawatts of electricity. Today, the world is adding an additional 500 gigawatts of electricity every year. That's because third world countries are advancing. So the idea that they're going to be able to power our world and talk about it like that, by the time they even get their foot off the ground, our world is going to be in disarray. So the idea that we're going to think about ITR project as a future possibility for generating electricity is good, but we're talking maybe 1,000 years from now, not today. So again, it's these scientists and engineers that work for universities or for somebody like this patting each other on the back and deceiving the world, because a lot of the world thinks, oh my gosh, maybe we're going to use fusion technology. Well, it's not possible right now. And by the way, a little more, just because so you understand, I know the details of a lot of this. They can only get their lasers to fire off every few minutes. They need them to fire off every second or two. And that's one of the major problems. The other one is trying to contain that much heat when they can, even though that the energy came from another energy source to do that. So it isn't like they've already solved it. I'm talking about just to maintain that much heat and produce energy off of it is they're unable to handle right now. And I know this is a little sideline thing, but nuclear, okay, nuclear uses old steam engine technology to generate energy. Many people don't know that. Nuclear is an energy heat source, but we're using 19th century technology steam engines to generate the power once that's done. I just wanted to throw that out at the audience. Okay, the next one is distributed energy. So that sounds real good, don't it? Well, unless the entire world has enough energy, again, wars would break out between everybody. Could you imagine one country, I'm going to give an example, next to Pakistan, India. Let's say India ends up, and I know that's a bad example because of the population, but let's say they end up with a huge amount of energy. And Pakistan don't have any. How long do you think it would be before the Pakistan people would go to India? And that could happen all over the world, because we're going to run out of energy if we don't change directions pretty soon here. So, the idea of distributed energy, or even a household. You're a house, and boy, you spend a lot of money with solar panels and wind, and you're generating energy. In other words, you would maybe have to install 10 times the amount of what they say to do that. But let's say you do, and you're a rich household, and boy, oh boy, you're sitting there and you've got energy. You think a neighbor's going to go without energy? Well, you do have. Again, wars would break out. This is very dangerous, the path we're going down, where everybody's on their own. We're in this together. The planet's in this together. Okay, next screen. United Nations challenge. I'm finally getting to it. The challenge I put out to the United Nations is totally unbelievable to most people. Completely unbelievable. Why would they think that I can generate unlimited energy? I kind of agree with you. It is unbelievable. So what did we do? We created a challenge to the United Nations. And the next set of screens will talk about what that challenge is. The first one is the capacity. We say, well, today our world generates 6.6 terawatts of electricity around the world. We say we can generate 100,000 terawatts of electricity around the world. Now, that's 15,000 Earths we think we can power through river flow, kinetic energy and river flow. Now, this challenge, the Worldwide Development Corporation is willing to stand by that challenge. And if we can't complete that challenge, we're willing to give up all rights to this new energy invention. That says a lot about credibility, don't it? That should say a great deal. Not asking for money and creating a challenge that most people think are unbelievable. That's what we've done. And we did it to the United Nations. And since the United Nations can't partner with us, we also submitted that challenge to major countries around the world. We're willing to do the same thing. If we can't fulfill that challenge, we'll give up the rights to the new energy invention. That says everything that needs to be said, because we don't want to play charades with something this important. What we want to do is bring in leaders of the world, and we'll get to that in a few seconds here. So let's, it's one thing to say you can create that much energy, because you hear Elon Musk say the power of the sun, we could power the planet and, whatever, in 20 minutes or something, but you can't capture it. It's not a dense energy source. In other words, the rays are everywhere. How in the world are you going to capture that sun? You can't. So the idea that they just throw that out there is pretty silly also. So let's look at the next slide. The next slide talks about, not only do we say we can create that much energy, we say we can create that much energy cheaper than any other energy source on the planet. Now, you combine those two things, and that makes it an unbelievable challenge, doesn't it? But it's not. Again, we stand by that challenge. We've stated on there 10% cheaper than coal and dams, et cetera. We, in reality, believe it's 25 or 30% cheaper. We just can't increase the challenge that much because of manipulation of cost. See, the other one is capacity, which is science. This is manipulation of cost. So we can't do that. But in reality, we think it would be 30% cheaper than even coal, which is supposed to be the cheapest energy source on the planet, and 75% cheaper than wind or solar, at least. Probably closer to 90%. But again, we can't put that challenge out there because of cost manipulation, et cetera. We feel comfortable with this. So the next one is electricity grids. We also think that we'll reduce the cost of electricity grids by 40% possibly around the world. Why? Because this new energy invention is all 24/7 energy. So we don't need the fancy software that GE and Siemens are introducing to the world right now, because again, why? They caused it installing wind turbines and in the solar panels. So it's very fancy software to try to balance the load on our electrical infrastructure. We won't need that. And by the way, one more thing about the new energy invention that's very cool that I hope the whole audience really pays attention to. It's easily expandable. It has backup built right into it, which allows us then, and I mean we believe 99.99% backup capabilities, which means that we can have one energy source. Without those two things, it's impossible to have one energy source. So that's built right into the design. Also, the efficiency of it's built in, the maintenance of it's built in, and it's, it is ready for prime time. The only thing all the technical work has been completed. The only thing I'm looking for is partners around the world that are responsible, that will help us introduce and implement this technology in a way that helps the bottom half of the world. We'll get into that right here, I think. No, the next thing is, I've heard a lot of people say, well, gosh, how are you going to get the world to implement this technology? Really? I mean, the idea that a country would not implement technology this advanced beyond what we have today would be silly. It'd be almost like continuing on with horses instead of having vehicles. They have to. And the implementation of this has to speed up real fast. Now you say, you want to help the bottom half of the world, which I think is the next screen we'll look at. Yeah, we see what's going on with the inequities around the world. And that's one of the reasons why we're trying to introduce and implement this technology in this way. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth in most countries around the world. Now we have China, same way, Russia the same way, United States the same way, even though our standard of living is much higher, so we think of, well, we're better off, but still 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth. What's the common theme between different government styles and everything else? It's greed. So what are we attempting to do? We want to help out the bottom 50% of the planet. We want to boost them up. Everybody's going to benefit from cheap energy. There'll be disruptions, major ones. But in the end, the wealthier countries are going to have a huge benefit from cheap energy. Huge. And they got the money to exploit that. The poorer countries don't. So our idea is that we're going to lift all boats. We've heard that many times, but we really feel that way. Our principles state that that's what we're going to do. So we want to take that bottom half of the world and give them a huge hop up. And that way, you know what? They actually have a chance to live the experiment we call humanity. Because right now they're just in total survival mode, and India especially, and that's why we have been working on trying to bring India in as a partner. Not because we need them, we're trying to help them. We want to supply enough energy for desalination. We want to make sure, you know, today India produces about 1/3 the amount of energy United States produces. They have 4 times the amount of people. So they're way behind. China's not behind. They're behind, but not as bad as India. You know, they produce the same as United States. They have 5 times the number of people. They both need energy in such a way that's just unimaginable. People living in this country couldn't imagine it. Okay, next slide. Okay, I got to look again. I'm sorry. People are concerned about employment. Oh my gosh, what are you going to do to the employment for all the energy companies and stuff? We believe this will create full employment. We got to keep the old systems going while we implement this new technology. For the next 20, 30 years, we expect full employment around the world. Now, it might be doing something different than what you were doing in the past, but we expect the employment picture around the world to double, which is huge for our country and the world. So any argument about, oh, we're going to lose some energy jobs, you know, the oil business is capital intensive, not labor intensive. I don't know how many people know that. I worked for Marathon Oil Company for 25 years as a lead analyst. I know that we're capital intensive. We look for money to do things, not people. Manufacturing is people intensive. So the idea of full employment is a solid idea. I mean, it's not an idea, a solid thing that will happen if we're responsible with implementing this technology in a hurry to solve climate change, to preserve our resources, and all the responsible things we need to do around the world. Okay, next screen. This is just to show you. You know, on the Earth time clock, which is a clock based on the entire time Earth's been around, dinosaurs made it for an hour. Okay? We've made it a little over a minute. I would think humanity can do better than that. But that's how far, based on the Earth time clock, that's the difference. We've made it 1/60th of the time dinosaurs have lived on this planet. And we're on a path to destroy our world if we're not careful. Imagine a world without oil, without energy, without plastics. Can you imagine a world of 10 billion people like that? No, because that world couldn't exist. So if we're not careful, we're going to have, you know, we see all these movies with, you know, in the future that seem like, oh boy, it's great because there's a few heroes and stuff. I'm quite sure that all of us in this world, if we're not careful here, it would not come out as heroes in the picture, in the movies that you see. The next thing, what's our mission? It's to get people to act bigger than themselves. Money has never been our mission. Matter of fact, we're not asking for it now. We're not going to ask for it in the future. We're looking for leaders around the world that are willing to act bigger than themselves. Now, I told you at the beginning of this, we've never asked for money. We still are not. So what leaders around the world are willing to step up for humanity, for your kids and your grandkids and everybody else's? Because that's where we're at. And our principles are solid, and we're not going to compromise on it. I've received emails from so many people around the world that you would not believe. The Prince of Saudi Arabia, the Prince of Dubai have sent me multiple emails to fund this. Many other groups around the world. I wanted to use those two as an example. But really, a German venture capital group, and they all say, like, as if, you know, you need money. No, we don't. All the work's done. Technical work's done. Prototypes built. Engineering's done. All we're looking for is partners that can responsibly help us implement this technology around the world. One man can change the world. This is the first time I've got a slide out there I disagree with. It's going to take all of us. I've built something that has eluded mankind up till now, through 13 years of effort, never thinking about money, and still am not thinking about money. But I can't change the world by myself. I put that out there, you know, thinking in that way at one time. No, it's going to take all of us. We all need to work together. We all need to be one planet, one family, and solve the issues of the sustainability of the human race. Okay, I think the last screen Everything is based on energy. How many people know that 98% of the activities in a modern society involve some type of energy? Energy is wealth. And I can guarantee you knowledge is worth more than money. Anybody can cut down trees and print money, but knowledge is critical. So what does the Worldwide Development Corporation need to move forward? We need to partner with 3 entities. The first one being a large country. We're hoping India, but it's not absolute, and if it's not India, we're fine with that. Why India? Because India would then fund the first prototype, but they wouldn't have to fund the prototype till the very large international engineering company validates the energy invention, right? That way, all they're doing is funding the first installation of it. Because we have said that we're willing to live up to that challenge, but there's something else that needs to be added to that. We say if the challenge can't be made right from the engineering and other materials that we have that are already completed, we're willing to give up the rights to the invention. Because everything is that clear. Engineering is that advanced. We actually think this new energy invention, not because of its complexities, because of its capabilities, is a century ahead of anything that's out there today. So we're willing to stand by that challenge. The engineering company will validate that, and the country, all they got to do is pay for the first. It's going to be a prototype, but really it's the first installation. It's theirs. They're just going to pay for the first installation. That makes us not have to go look for money. And then the international law firm is going to handle the patents and all the other things that are necessary legal-wise to make sure that this is protected so it helps the bottom half of the world and creates what I call a world where anything is possible anywhere in the world. I thank you for watching the presentation, and I appreciate everybody's time very much. Thank you very much.